Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dairy Raid. And spring football is finally behind us, and it's time to start looking forward towards fall camp and the eventual kickoff of the 2026 season. And we are going to do that here at the Dairy Raid with a little series that I'm calling Spring Forward. Clever title, huh? Where we are going to take a look back at what we have learned so far about the 2026 Badgers and apply those lessons to the players, the coaches, the systems that we are building and we're building toward for Notre Dame on September 6th. So to kick off this series, we're going to go with a position by position recap and evaluate the performances from the players and the coaches to see if we can gain a better understanding of each position room and find any potential context clues pointing towards the direction that that position room is going in the future. And I think there is no better place to start when recapping spring ball than that with the offensive line and their new offensive line coach, Eric Mateos. So not only is the offensive line gaining yet another new offensive line coach, but with 5 incoming transfers and players switching position, there's a lot of new bodies, a lot of new ideas, a lot of talent, but limited shared experience, which is what Coach Mateos calls no skins on the wall. We know what the parts look like, but we got to build those parts towards the ultimate goal, and that is flat out successful offensive line play. And this is even for the players who are returning, who've been in the offense, who were here last year with Coach Blazek, but more importantly with Coach Grimes. It's still a fresh start. Everybody on this team in the offensive line room is having a fresh start. And as a player, that can be liberating, but it can also be nerve-wracking at the same time. And it's hard for us to evaluate them as a finished unit because, one, we haven't seen it, and we don't know exactly yet what they're trying to become. But we're building towards that. And the first thing that you're going to notice about this offensive line room is the physicality is back. And to some people, that might be offensive line is always physical. And it was last year, and that's true. But there is a bit more nastiness, a bit more willing to finish plays beyond the echo of the whistle that is refreshing, but it's also necessary in an offense like this where we're going to be working in so much space. When you add physicality and nastiness to a blocking scheme or just an offensive line philosophy in general where we are going to put big bodies in space, you got to be mean when you're doing it. It's going to fire guys up, and it's going to get them to move faster and hit harder when they get there. So the physicality is coming back. What's going to take the most time to develop is the communication and the cohesion that comes with the scheme as you're building up through it. And when you have a new offensive line coach who is going to teach different, who has different terminology when it comes to various aspects of offensive line play, that takes time. Now, the lucky thing for this group is the common denominator, which is Coach Grimes. Eric Mateos and Jeff Grimes have worked together in multiple stops. If there's a person who knows how the offensive line room should work in his system, it's Eric Mateos. So I think we're in a good spot. And what I find refreshing about Coach Mateos' coaching style is how he progresses his players through the process of learning scheme. And everything builds towards scheme. That is the final output, the final product of coaching, is to be able to apply it on the football field. But it starts at the bottom with your fundamental skills, your footwork, your hand placement, just the basics, the stuff you do on air, the stuff you do on pillows, blocking shields. And when you get the basic footwork, the basic hand placement down, now you can start building technique. Now you can start fine tuning. And now you can start customizing. And once we know how to block, now we got to be able to communicate with each other. So the guy next to me knows what I'm doing, so he can gain that half a step advantage. And we can work, again, in unison as a unit. We have the skills, we have the technique, we have the communication. Then we can have scheme. And when you have this kind of systematic approach where you're teaching football at a micro level and not a macro level, you make the game much more customizable for each individual player, because every player has a different body type, has a different set of intangibles, has a different set of football skills. But every player can be useful on a football team. So if you can start with the building blocks of skill and then work your way to scheme, you can give each player almost an individual coaching philosophy. And by doing so, you give the players their individual football base that they can apply going forward. And it makes it much easier to fix one small thing at a time than working at an overall macro view and trying to fix everything at the same time. So I find that really refreshing. Not that every coach doesn't think kind of that way, but when you focus on the progression, if you can't skip steps in the progression, that's when you build lasting technique, and you make it much easier for play callers to apply that in scheme down the road. All right, so when we're watching the clips that we can see of practice, and they're few and far between, but we're seeing a lot of situations where people would say, it looks like our offensive linemen are losing these reps. And we see a lot of one-on-one pass blocking, a lot of one-on-one blitz pickup. That has been a big chunk of what we have seen about the offensive line this spring. And what I like about using drills like that in a daily or a weekly setting where you're doing it a lot is it is putting the offensive line in a disadvantageous position on purpose. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you think of a offensive tackle, how many times in a game is an offensive tackle going to be in a one-on-one blitz pickup situation with an outside linebacker who's playing off the ball to the field side with infinite amount of space on either side and a direct path and a direct mindset to get to the quarterback? When you put all those pieces together, the answer is not very often. And so what you are doing with a situation like this, where you're essentially creating failure for the offense, is you can't hide weakness. Because you can hide weakness with scheme. And by adding extra stress, you simplify and you accelerate the learning process. High intensity, you get it in a game-like competition kind of attitude, that we can see the little things very clearly, and we can get back to, okay, you lost that rep. How was your feet? How was your hips? How was your hand placement? We're going to work on that. We're going to build. So when you see one-on-one pass blocking and blitz pickup drills, it's not about the offensive lineman failing. For the offensive lineman to win a rep in a drill like that, the defense has to lose. Anything else is a win for the defense. Or what I mean is, for the drill to be successful for the offense is the defense has to, reset, get the brain working. For the offense to win one of those reps, all they have to do is keep the blitzer or the rusher from getting to the quarterback on time. And even if they lose the rep in terms of initial footwork and placement or whatever, and that defender gets through, was their hand placement correct? Was their initial feet correct? Did they get their hips down? And then when we build scheme into it later, the errors that we saw in a drill like that are going to go away. The key coaching point that I can give you on those is, again, don't worry about the outcome. Worry about the footwork that gets you there and the basic skills. But regardless, Wisconsin, we're going to be a running team. That's going to be our bread and butter. And with the added physicality, we're going in the right direction. But offensive line play is not just about being the biggest and being the strongest. It is about winning the leverage battle, or more importantly, winning the leverage battles. And as Coach Mateos put it, there are 3 leverage battles that need to be won on every rep. There's a body position and placement, there's hands, and there's feet. You win the leverage battle in position by being where you're supposed to when you're supposed to be there. You win the hands battle by getting your hands inside in the correct position and having the ability to use your hands inside and out. And your hips win the leverage battle. If you're able to sink your hips, you'll be able to get your power through your hips, and then you can drive with a low base. You have 3 leverage battles. If you can win 2 out of 3, you're probably going to win the rep. You win all 3, you're going to dominate the rep. And you can't have one without the others. So, and again, this is where we can see that individualizing and the breaking down of coaching is you are going to have guys who have quick feet, but maybe their hands are not as fast. So we can build through that, but you have to win at least 2 out of 3 of these to really get that positioning, and that's going to build to the scheme in the run game. And if we get that, then the run game is going to start looking like Wisconsin football again, and I'm really hoping we're going to get there this year. But as we talked about in the beginning, you can have all of the technique and the skill in the world. If you cannot communicate with each other, you're not going to function as a complete unit. There is going to be issues with timing. There is going to be issues with trust. And when you have an offensive line who's never worked together, that's what's going to take the most. So I'm really happy to see as the spring went on that they settled into, I would say, a solid 4 out of 5 unit, probably pretty much for every level of the team, the first team, second team, third team, as we're going through, to get those guys really focused on working together. And that leads us in to start talking about, we're getting through the coach speech, and we're getting into what a lot of you really want to talk about, and that's the players. So, what can we say about the offensive line so far this spring, and what work do they have left to do? Well, let's start with the tackles. And a lot of the early comments on the tackles was PJ Wilkins, who played guard at Ole Miss, took over seemingly right away at left tackle. And a lot of people really question that move because they didn't see him having traditional measurables, traditional body type. But as Coach Mateos put it, you have to look beyond the measurables and look at the traits and look at the non-traditional measurables like reach, like base. And when you saw PJ Wilkins working against Sebastian Cheeks and Nick Clayton, he might not have a traditional left tackle build, but he blocks like a very solid left tackle. And does he have elite get off? Does he have elite feet? Maybe not, but he's got a solid base and he does not let those rushers get into his body. And he's able to control and deflect, which is a really positive step forward especially when we said the left tackle play last season. So with PJ Wilkins at left tackle, that means the presumed left tackle, Kevin Haywood, is moving over to right tackle. And I think for him, that is a more natural position. I think he was playing left tackle or is developing as a left tackle out of necessity, because the way that the coaching staff saw left tackle play in his previous 2 seasons here, Kevin Haywood was close enough. But I don't think he was naturally fit to play left tackle. I think he might have done a good job, but I think he's going to do an even better job at right tackle. It allows him to be a mauler, which when you're 6'9" and well over 300 pounds, that's what you want to have. And that's the mentality that you want to take with it. And final tackle that I want to talk about is Lucas Simmons, who, again, I think people, when they saw the transfer portal additions, they thought, oh, maybe there's our left tackle, me included. I think he's got untapped potential based off of a ridiculous set of measurables. He's so quick for his size, but he is still learning the game at a high level. And you saw, though, towards the end, he was starting to get some sneaky reps with the ones at left tackle. And they moved PJ Wilkins to right tackle for some reps. They put Kevin Haywood at right tackle for some reps. They put Kevin Haywood at left tackle and put Lucas Simmons at right tackle. So I think right there, you have a solid first team of 3 tackles that Coach Mateos can build up. And then you've got your your Davenports and your Ruskies of the world who are going to provide depth. They're still young, and they are going to be able to build up through the system. And in a year or two, are going to eventually, we're getting ourselves back with an offensive line room where we're not replacing starters with freshmen and redshirt freshmen. We're replacing starters with redshirt juniors, redshirt sophomores, and seniors. But moving on to the interior Austin Kwecky, I think the best part of what the work Austin Kwecky did this spring, we didn't hear anything about his snaps. We didn't hear anything about him being overwhelmed. For the most part, he was rock solid in his blitz pickup drills. He is just a solid system fit center that is going to serve as the model blueprint for how Wisconsin centers are going to be as long as this offensive system is in place. He knows what he's doing. He's got the physicality, and more importantly, he's got the quickness to play center in an offense that is going to require him to run and wall off a 3-tech to his snap hand side or wider and do it with some nastiness. So that position is locked up. Okay, Ryan Corey getting snaps, and curious thing that I noticed with his snaps this spring is he was working with a dead ball snap technique where if you look at him doing it, it is essentially grabbing the back half of the football instead of holding it in a passing grip. Snaps come a little bit slower, but they, as the term calls it, they come dead. So you can position the ball in the snapper's hand where it's going to hit the quarterback with the laces right on his fingers. So you're going to make up some time there, and hopefully the change in technique is going to help him become more solid. We also saw Logan Powell taking some snaps at center as well. So we got some depth there. At guard, it started out as a 3-way battle for 2 spots with Emerson Mandel holding down one guard spot and Blake Cherry and Colin Cubberley working to win the other. And then Emerson Mandel got hurt and he missed most of spring, which brought Styles Blackman into the competition. And this is a great transfer portal evaluation by Coach Mateos and seeing the skill that despite playing at a lower level, he thought could translate to Big Ten play. And I think he's got the football IQ and the versatility to play all 3 interior spots, that he just needs to be brought up to Big Ten speed. And it sounds like with the amount of reps that he was getting there towards the end, he's close to being Big Ten ready. So assuming Emerson Mandel comes back from his injury and is able to go full speed this spring, not only does that mean we now have 4 solid potential guards, but that also allows Emerson Mandel to potentially play right tackle as well. And it adds just that bit more depth. So to kind of wrap up talking about the first team personnel, I think we're pretty stable at the tackle position between Wilkins and Haywood. We're more fluid interior with the guards, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. We're building depth, and we're building usable depth where it's not going to be a situation where one guy goes, we're 1 guy away from a true freshman having to play. We have depth. There's a reason why they brought in 5 players at different age ranges, class levels, to fill in the gaps with some older players, but also like with Blake Cherry, bringing in a younger guy who has that nastiness that needs to be emulated by his classmates. So it's definitely a step in the right direction. And I think personnel-wise, this is going to be the most solid and most stable floor we have had in the entire Luke Fickell era. All right, so to wrap it up, and to put a pin on the offensive line group this spring. I think they're building in the right direction. I really love how Coach Grimes and Coach Mateos coach offensive line. The scheme from Coach Grimes and the execution and the teaching from Coach Mateos. But this isn't about just finding 5 guys. It is turning that room into a functional unit. And by having some position battles, I mean, we really see where we have got, I think right now we're 8 deep on the O-line. And we definitely couldn't say that at this point last year. But it's about building the standard. It is about maintaining that level of nastiness with better technique, with stronger communication, but more importantly, with more accountability. Because Wisconsin offensive linemen should take inability to run the ball and quarterbacks getting sacked personally. Not just because it makes them look bad, but it makes the school look bad. So, moving forward to fall camp, that's where we're going to see how the skills that they worked on this spring are going to be translated into scheme and is going to be translated into a game plan going forward. All right. I think we're going to wrap it up there. We'll talk about the offensive line this spring. Next time, well, we're going to go right into it. We're going to go into the quarterbacks. And we're going to see where the quarterbacks stand after spring ball and how we're going to look forward to fall camp in the 2026 season. And are we finally going to get competent quarterback play for the first time in forever at Wisconsin? But that will be next time. Thank you as always for watching. Please be sure to check out the Dairy Rates Substack, where there is a written companion piece to this audio breakdown. And you can learn a little bit more about the teaching that goes behind the offensive line room. All right. Thank you as always for listening and watching. We'll see you next time.